Every great story of innovation is born not from a sudden spark of genius, but from the slow, burning frustration with the status quo. The frustration that finally breaks a man's patience. The year is 1941. Global conflict is not just looming, it is already grinding away at American industry. Every wasted minute, every inefficient action comes with a terrible cost. At the Mare Island Naval Shipyard, where welder Ted Nelson earned his living, the enemy wasn't Germany or Japan. It was the established procedure. The specific, soul-crushing problem: securing wooden deck planking on naval vessels. Wood was critical for traction and insulation, but the method used to fasten it belonged to another century. It was an exercise in pure labor intensity. In every shift, Nelson witnessed the same infuriating ritual. Crews of up to a dozen men clustered around a single section of decking. The ultimate irony? To secure a single bolt, they had to construct vast, temporary scaffolding structures beneath the steel deck, deep inside the submarine's cramped, dark compartments. Up top, one man drills and drops the long threaded bolt. Below, in a suffocating space barely 4 feet high, another worker, back aching, knuckles raw, has to carefully locate the bolt end and manually thread the nut. Hour after agonizing hour, day after repetitive day, just to secure a piece of wood. This single task required days to complete one submarine deck. 2 days to build the scaffolding, a day to tear it down. The actual fastening process demanded grueling precision and a patience that America simply did not have. Nelson knew this was the real structural weakness, not enemy fire, but these wasted minutes. He scribbled in his notebook, "This is madness. They keep telling me to work faster, but refuse to listen to my solution." That single frustrated conviction was the genesis of the invention that would save 50 million man-hours. In the midst of chaos, clarity is born. For Ted Nelson, the solution was not complex. It was simply hidden in plain sight, overlooked for decades. Why all the hassle of tightening a nut from below? Why not simply weld a threaded stud directly to the steel frame, from the top side only? No scaffolding, no nuts and bolts, no men crawling in the darkness. Stud welding wasn't entirely new, but it had a fatal flaw. It only worked on flat, horizontal surfaces using loose flux powder. In the naval environment, where welding was vertical, overhead, or angled, the powder simply fell away. And here lay Nelson's true stroke of genius. His most critical innovation was the addition of a small ceramic ferrule, or cap. This cap contained the flux powder, holding it securely around the base of the stud, regardless of the welding angle. The gun would be pressed against the metal, an electric arc would be drawn, and in less than 1 second, the stud was permanently welded, creating a bond often stronger than the traditional bolt. Buoyed by confidence, Nelson took his sketches to his supervisor, Lieutenant Morrison. This wasn't just an idea, it was a guaranteed, immediate salvation of labor. But the frustration was far from over. In a sterile meeting room, Nelson met the unyielding wall of bureaucracy. "We have established procedures, Mr. Nelson. We follow Navy specifications. If you wish to innovate, stick to your current assignment." The second rejection came from the chief engineer, polite but equally insulting. The idea wasn't rejected because it wouldn't work, but because it was unapproved. "Son, smarter men than you have been trying to solve this problem for 2 decades. To change the Navy's specifications, you need approval from the Bureau of Ships in Washington. That requires studies, tests, and prototypes. It takes at least 18 months. Stunned and fueled by indignation, Nelson made one last attempt, a formal letter to the shipyard commander. He waited 3 weeks. The reply arrived. Thank you for your interest. Your suggestion has been forwarded for consideration. Please note that the review process typically takes 18 to 24 months. Every official door was slammed shut in the face of the inventor, but Ted Nelson was not about to let bureaucracy defeat a national necessity. He decided to risk everything. The doors had been slammed shut. The solution that would save thousands of man-hours had been ignored. But Ted Nelson wasn't a man to bury a living idea. His priority was higher than a steady paycheck. His country needed that speed. That evening, he made the decision that would alter his life and the course of naval construction. If the Navy wouldn't listen, he would force them to pay attention. He would prove his concept worked on his own terms. Ted, you're going to throw away a steady job for this crazy invention? You're supposed to be working on Navy projects, not your own. Over the following weeks, the small garage became a clandestine workshop. Nelson worked nights and weekends, using scrap steel and his modest equipment to construct his first prototype stud welding gun. By May 1941, he had a working model. He tested it in every conceivable position: flat, vertical, overhead. The gun worked flawlessly, a perfect weld in less than 1 second, crucially, from one side only. On June 20, 1941, Nelson handed in his resignation to the Mare Island Naval Shipyard. His supervisor, Morrison, tried to talk him out of it. I'm going to build welding guns, and when the Navy comes back asking to buy thousands of them, I hope you remember this conversation. On July 1, 1941, he incorporated the Nelson Specialty Welding Equipment Corporation. He secured a $95,000 loan from the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, an government agency established to support small businesses. It was a perilous gamble. The first months were a brutal grind. Nelson was a welder, not a salesman. He traveled to local machine shops and private fabrication companies, demonstrating his gun. Most were skeptical. A few were interested enough to place a small order. By September, he had sold only 18 welding guns. He was winning small battles, but the larger war was still lost. He believes the private market would be his key to success, but history was preparing a much larger stage. Then, on December 7th, 1941, the day of infamy. The attack on Pearl Harbor was not just a military disaster. It was the brutal alarm bell that mobilized American industry overnight. Suddenly, the debate over established procedures vanished. Bureaucracy was instantly replaced by the terrifying need for survival. Shipbuilding was no longer a matter of efficiency. It was a matter of national existence. The government demanded a monumental acceleration in production. The traditional methods, the scaffolding, the crawling, the hand-tightening, were now seen as a national liability. They were too slow. They wasted precious days. And then the phone calls started. Ted Nelson, the mad welder who was easily dismissed just weeks earlier, became the most sought-after man in the industry. Shipyard purchasing agents who had rejected him now pleaded for his equipment. Kaiser Shipyards ordered 50 guns, Bethlehem Steel 40. Even the Mare Island Naval Shipyard, the very place that had cast him out, placed an emergency order for 60 guns. Nelson's prediction had come true, but on a scale no one could have imagined. His humble invention, the ceramic cap and the handheld gun, was suddenly the key to unlocking the nation's shipbuilding bottleneck. The evidence arrived almost immediately. Reports poured in. A submarine deck installation that had previously chained 12 workers for 6 days could now be completed by just 3 workers in a single day. The 2 days previously wasted constructing and dismantling scaffolding were instantly freed up, allowing those critical workers to move on to other tasks. The weld was also stronger and more reliable than the through-bolt method. By January 1942, less than a month after Pearl Harbor, Nelson's small workshop was overwhelmed. He needed a factory, capital, and hundreds of workers. The transformation from individual inventor to national supplier was complete. With demand turning into a tidal wave, Nelson knew his small workshop was obsolete. He needed a real factory, a real assembly line. Within weeks, Nelson leased a larger facility. By March 1942, he employed 20 workers. By September, that number ballooned to 150. The factory ran around the clock, 7 days a week. Nelson's gun rolled off the line at a rate of 30 per day, while stud production reached into the thousands. Every major shipyard on the West Coast was now reliant on his equipment. The application quickly expanded beyond just securing decks. It was used for pipe hangers, cable supports, mounting equipment, anything requiring a quick, permanent fastener to the steel structure. The time savings were immense. At Mare Island, submarine construction time began to plummet. Stud welding wasn't the only innovation, but it was a crucial piece of the efficiency puzzle. The greatest impact was on big ships and mass production. The Essex-class aircraft carriers, the backbone of the Pacific Strike Force, each required approximately 20,000 welded studs. Perhaps the largest volume came from the monumental Liberty ships, the cargo vessels that kept the Allies alive. 2,710 were built, each using between 5,000 and 8,000 studs for cargo flooring and fixtures. By late 1942, the Navy had compiled its figures. An official delegation from the very Bureau of Ships that had previously rejected him was dispatched. Mr. Nelson, we are here to inform you that your invention has saved the United States Navy an estimated 5 million man-hours in ship construction over the past 10 months. I have reviewed your file. Your proposal was not properly evaluated at the time. That was a mistake, and I apologize on behalf of the Navy. Sometimes the best way to serve your country is to bypass official channels and simply solve the problem. The acknowledgement of 5 million man-hours was just the prelude. As the war raged on and stud welding became standard procedure, the figures multiplied exponentially. Essex carriers and battleships, destroyers and escort vessels, the landing craft that made the invasion of Normandy possible. Everywhere, Nelson's innovation allowed for faster, stronger fastening. In May 1943, the contribution of the Nelson Corporation was recognized at the highest level. The company was awarded the coveted Army-Navy E Award for excellence in production. This award was created to honor the 5% of companies providing outstanding performance in both quality and quantity. Nelson, in his usual shop clothes, stood before his workforce to accept the honor. The achievement didn't stop there. The company maintained its exceptional performance, earning its first star in November 1943 and a second star in May 1944. The accomplishments in the shipyards were staggering. At the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, a submarine construction powerhouse, workers set an unprecedented global record, launching 4 submarines in a single day. That achievement relied on numerous innovations, but stud welding was a critical enabling technology. The gun saved precious minutes that were then compounded across the thousands of fastening points on every submarine. As the war concluded in August 1945, the final figure was tallied. Official citations documented that the Nelson Company had saved the U.S. Navy an estimated 50 million man-hours. 50 million man-hours. That's the equivalent of 5,700 continuous years of labor for one person. That time was converted directly into fighting power in the Pacific and the Atlantic. But Nelson's legacy wasn't just about efficiency. It had a profound social impact. The ease of use of the gun made it possible to employ women in huge numbers in the shipyards. Nelson, the welder who defied bureaucracy, had given his country not just a tool, but a condition for victory: the ability to build faster than the enemy could destroy. With millions of men deployed overseas, America's industrial might suddenly rested on the shoulders of those left behind. The war required a fundamental change in who did the welding. Traditional arc welding required years of practice and intense physical strength, but Nelson's stud gun simplified the task, making high-quality, high-speed fastening accessible to nearly everyone. The ease of operation meant that thousands of women who had never worked in heavy industry were now quickly and safely securing bulkheads and fittings on crucial vessels. The sheer speed of the process enabled them to meet the crushing production quotas. The peak years of the American war machine, 1944 and 1945, were built on this foundation of efficiency. Every major piece of equipment, from landing craft ramps to internal submarine cable runs, carried Nelson's invisible signature. The final accounting of 50 million man-hours was a testament not only to an ingenious invention, but to the human ability to adapt and overcome institutional inertia when faced with a true crisis. The war was approaching its final, brutal end. But for Ted Nelson, the battle to secure his legacy and his company was just beginning. August 1945. The war was won, the contracts were canceled, and America's industrial machine ground to a halt. The demand for stud welding evaporated overnight. Nelson's company, having peaked at 400 employees, shrank dramatically. Many businesses born of the war effort simply disappeared. But Nelson was a visionary, not just a war supplier. He understood that an innovation born of military necessity could be indispensable in peacetime. Stud welding was too efficient, too strong, and too simple to be confined to ships. Nelson repurposed his invention, applying the same principles to civil construction. Suddenly, bridges, skyscrapers, and industrial frames could be erected faster and more cheaply than ever before. Nelson's true long-term genius was seeing the civilian application. He successfully transitioned his company from military supplier to a critical part of the post-war building boom. His system is in the steel skeleton of virtually every modern high-rise.